So instead of adding to my collection of coffee filters, used coffee filters, today we're just going to grab the latest round that I bought down from the kitchen and emptied into my little coffee storage box. These are going to go straight into today's feeding of the mixed red worms that live in Twine. And I think my collection of coffee filters is plenty. I don't need to add to it. And, oh boy, a lot of activity going on down here. The way we left this system last time was me sort of acknowledging that I was going to either do something about giving this system a little bit of extra access to airflow by maybe raising up the top covering, the plastic covered cardboard. And that's exactly what I did. I was wondering what happened to this little carton box bottom. I was looking around for it and totally spaced out on the fact that I had propped up the cover with this to allow for a little bit of airflow. And it just seems like the worms went to town eating the food that had been placed into the feeding zone right beneath it. And then the whole thing dropped. And I think the worms are also kind of drawn to a heavy, or not so much the thing that's heavy, but I guess the pressure caused by the heavy object being on the material. Because just that weight of that cardboard focused down onto this little section here. And don't forget, the downward force was focused onto just a tiny little surface along that edge. It wasn't the entire flat surface pressing down, just the little outer edge. And it did seem to be enough to help with the wear of the coffee filter that had been placed right there to mark that feeding zone. Oh, by the way, thank you. I was informed of a little goof up because the feeding zone, the feeding zone indicators were placed like so to show that we would have fed down the middle as well as on these two outer edges, but I believe that the spot where we actually fed was the other two edges. So I never came back to correct it, and I didn't even realize it until a viewer pointed it out, and I had to play the video back just to confirm that I really made such a goofy blunder. Alright, well, the mango seed and its skin that was placed down onto the feeding zone that was out on this edge is steadily getting worked, and this is just the sort of thing that's going to take probably months before it's even possible to open it up and allow worms access to the seed inside. That's just that tough outer husk of the mango seed. And, well, definitely some leftovers of the food given to them last time. Kind of the reason I like this pattern of feeding, where the feeding zone kind of moves around, the moving target almost. Because then whatever you might have fed the previous go around, and if there's leftovers of it still lingering, you don't feel like you're sort of cramming more food at them when they haven't even finished the previous portion. The activity can simply continue with the leftovers from the last feeding, if there are any, and then the newly added stuff is in a place where there probably hadn't been any freshly added food lately. So now we're starting to definitely see good bits of the large twine. And guess what? I've got a new system that was built out of twine, similar to this one, except in the case of that one, the yellow bucket where the twine was laid down as the foundation, the bedding, that stuff I actually untwisted. This is the full size of the rope right here, the full thickness of it thrown into this system. And the bottom line is that any portions of this that are kind of obscured from worm access, you know, like that little gap that I'm opening by unwinding one of the three threads that twist around each other, the stuff down in there is hardly even touched. And then I even go one step further and I start to unwind the next layer too. So the stuff that I built that other twine-based worm bin out of is drastically different. We're giving all that material a much greater opportunity to get worm traffic by being unwound and not allowing it to obscure itself. All right. That was pretty interesting. I guess we'll take a peek over on the other side and see how the feeding zone over on that other side's doing, and then we'll feed in the proper place, and then the feeding zone indicators will simply go back to those spots where they were marking the incorrect spot for where we last fed. All right, here I'm just going to see if we can burn through this a little bit more quickly. Oh boy, okay, yeah. Definitely encountering a worm party down here. I'm not seeing so much mango. Perhaps the main event down here was something else. I thought I saw banana peel and I thought I smelled citrus. All right, well, think of the two sides that we just checked. The side over here is the one that was a little bit more interesting as far as worms coming out. You know, let's take this little dry stuff over here and blend it in, or at least submerge it. And then, yeah, there's the banana peels stem. Let's get that stuff back down there. And, you know, let's see, it was 175, 11 days later, we're at 186 is this age of the system. Fed 15 times. This is going to be feeding 16 going in here. There's a nice portion here. Look at all this. Apple peel, apple cores, and I believe there was something else in here. When I dumped it out, I remember there was something else, but I can't remember what it was that was thrown in there with the apple peels. We're going to have a nice feeding for these little guys, and the little wheel in my head is spinning, questioning whether or not we want to stick to the whole thing of giving this system airflow by propping up the cover again. It feels like it might have helped a bit. It at this point feels like I don't really want to promote any further drying. But let's see, we're now into feeding zone number 3. 3 of 3 feeding zones. And this is the one that always remains static right here in the middle. Here I'm seeing some more mango peel and a great deal of worms coming out with the foods that we fed. And, you know, I think we're going to give these little guys a moment to settle in, and then we can come in here with their delicious feast of a meal. All right, so these two nice flat coffee filters were actually borrowed from the little collection I was waving in front of you earlier, so that those will become our nice new replacement feeding zone indicators, and perhaps one of the old ones can be held on to as well, because we do need to mark 3 different feeding zones. Or do we? You know, I've wondered now, would it be possible for us to simply excavate a trench all the way across the way we do in all my other systems? And that would be only possible if we can simply dig down through a section where in the past we never would have been able to because of all the rope all intertwined. It just feels so weird every time I refer to the intertwining of twine. And there's a stem of a pumpkin. You know, I think we're going to take a little departure from the triple feeding zones, and now that we can, we're going to let this system adopt the typical routine of having a trench right down the middle, and that'll just help the whole system start to seem a little bit more like all the others in my wormery. So, guess what? We've got a whole bunch of extra stuff that we can use as supplemental bedding to go along with the feeding that they're getting. And oh yeah, I forgot about that. That kind of scared me there for a second. This is that cotton rope, the type that's used to tie up boxes at the bakery. You know the type of rope that I'm referring to, string I figured that stuff would probably do well in here and get broken down. But now that I'm looking to excavate a trench in the customary fashion, I feel like I'm really kind of at my limit here as far as room to shove material. So perhaps we might want to start thinking about skipping the application of bedding in a few future check-ins, just so we don't continue to work our way into a situation where I've got insufficient space to do my thing. All right, so bringing in the delicious assortment of stuff. So all I thought was that perhaps instead of simply piling it in the way we usually do, we would create little gift packages for them. And you know, before we get much further along, let's also drop in a nice big foundational piece of bedding napkin, onto which we can sprinkle a little delicious coffee, and then in can start coming the delicious care packages. And this rope, I guess, keep that in a place where there's going to be a good bit of activity right there on top of the apple peels. And yeah, we got a whole bunch of these things. Let's see what we could do about filling them up. Alrighty. This one, well, some of them are already torn open, so those we can't really use as little cups, but most of them are still intact so that they can hold a little payload of delicious foods. Very nice. I used to like doing this because it reminded me, hey, you got to include bedding. Don't be such a bedding miser. Because that's what I always used to be, I think. And I'm so glad that I've kind of changed my evil ways when it comes to being a bedding miser. Okay, now we're down to some chunks of really badly spoiled orange that I knew I hacked up and tossed in this bag. I knew there was still one last something in here that I had not really spotted yet. And man, that's a pretty generous feeding if you ask me. Oh, how'd this worm get in here? Gotta be careful. I just had a little hitchhiker worm land on my food supply transport container. And I just grabbed one more coffee filter that would have been the feeding zone indicator. So guess what? I'm tapping into my supply to grab yet another one. And before we cover up the feeding zone, I'm throwing in a little bit of pulverized eggshell and a little bit more coffee. And man, oh man, that's a pretty cool feeding with all that supplementary bedding. And it's also kind of cool that we've managed to get away from that kind of unusual triple feeding zone approach. But by doing it this way, we did actually allow these two outer edges from the feeding 11 days ago to kind of continue out there. And perhaps at some point we'll just retrieve that that mango seed that we know is over on that side and include it with the regular feedings down the middle. But I think from this point forward we'll try to run this system with a feeding zone that's simply down the middle, just like I usually have. And then we could mark our feeding zone right there. And the other thing that was really nice last time we came in here was the way we were greeted by a whole bunch of top dressing leafy matter, which I proceeded to blend in last time. And there wasn't a whole lot of it out here today, so I figured let's set up for the next check-in by having a really nice top coating that we can blend in next time. And I think we're gonna have to start cooling it with the bedding because there's a lot in here. And do we prop it up again? Do we give more airflow, or do we allow the moisture to remain? I'm thinking at this point we're in pretty good shape, so why don't we just leave all this material that's adhered to this little piece of carton box and not worry so much about ventilation anymore. We're going to simply put the top covering right back on the way it normally is, resting on the top surface. So that's it for our check-in with the mixed red worms today. At day 186, getting feeding number 16. Things look really nice in here. And yeah, we're almost at capacity. We're going to have to cool it. All right, everyone, that's it for the check-in. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.